Hey, coaches, what are some common habits that you might find yourself working on with your clients in a corporate setting? So, first off, you have the idea of communicating personally. And this comes in a few different flavors. It might be that this individual has received feedback that they are not very personable towards their peers or their direct reports. There's not a sense that they are willing or interested in connecting on a personal level. This is becoming more and more important with global companies and remote workers, and a real mix between workers who are comfortable connecting personally and leaders who might not be as comfortable, but they need to adjust their approach in order to meet the needs of their team members. So that's one type of habit that might be an area of development for a client where how can the questions might be and the habits would be around how can they regularly reach out to their team members, their direct reports? How can they insert it into their work week in a way that becomes second nature and yet not inauthentic? And that can be a real challenge and something where coaches can be an excellent support. Another way the idea of communicating personally, that type of habit comes into play, might be in how an individual, how a client is connecting with their skip level manager or their executive and gaining exposure more at an executive level or with upper level leadership. In this way, it's very similar process, except usually the habits are going to be less frequent, and the coach and the client will often design the habit formation around the behaviors that lead up to good communication with the executive. So it's not about having regular conversations with these individuals, but maybe regular preparation for those conversations, regularly writing down notes about what they could talk about and share with their executives, maybe in order to demonstrate more recognition to their team. They write down once a day 2 or 3 things they're grateful for about their team, and once a week there's a habit of maybe reaching out to their skip level manager to let them know some of the good news of that team. That's just a little example, but again, the idea of personally communicating, making a connection that way. And there's also an extra flavor of this, communicating personally, around networking, whether it's within a team, within an organization, in business unit, within a field, or just in general, being able to network well. What are the habits that the person wants to put in place? And based on that general habit around communicating and networking, what are those little behaviors? And so the swarm of behaviors from BJ Fogg that build up better networking habits. Oftentimes, when a client comes to us for help in connecting better with individuals, communicating more effectively, networking, they don't usually talk in terms of the habits they need to change, but underneath the surface are usually it's usually habit coaching that they most benefit from, because we were looking at some behavior change, some things that they're less familiar with doing. So what are their current cues and triggers that we might be able to latch onto? And what are some tiny experiments, especially for those who are less comfortable with reaching out and being personable? Maybe their family or national culture was really downplaying the idea of personal connections at work. And here they're in a company where it is very important. As they make adjustments, it'll be hard for them to make big leaps, maybe. So that idea of the tiny habit can be very useful as we look at the cue and trigger and then the routine and reward. Also, it's great to look at the learning from the experiments and what they could do to build that learning into routines while asking questions around how would you want to keep your approach and your language fresh? How would you have these conversations in a way that would be authentic? What would be an indicator to you that you're not being very authentic with these conversations? You know, a coach should explore that territory, especially when you're talking about habits in communication. We don't want these things just to be automated rather than authentic. Another category of habits that are common in a corporate environment are reacting in the moment. These are tricky to coach around, but they are still in the realm of behavior change, behavior modification, and habit formation. Again, we're still talking about stuff that's within the realm of coaching, not anger management and things that are better suited within the realm of therapy. But if a person wants to have better body language or face language in reaction to what a coworker says in a meeting, if they want to be very mindful not to have a snarky comment because their families, as a kid, everyone used sarcasm to joke, and now they're using sarcasm to joke about how this person's not good at communicating in a board meeting, and they're doing a very bad job of being an executive. That's something, it's not a specific agenda. That's been multiple agendas for me as a coach that I've worked with people on, where they have a hard time reacting in the moment and they want to adjust that. The thing that makes this difficult is that we're not talking about a habit that is happening every day. These are habits that are in place when something happens. And that thing that happens, we don't know when it will happen. It could be whenever a direct report comes and talks to them, if that direct report mentions a certain thing or says something a certain way. In board meetings, not all of them. In the leadership team meetings, not all of them. But every once in a while, when this person speaks and they talk in this way, this is the habit, the reaction that just automatically happens on the part of the client. How can we improve that? Well, here, it's important to look at all of the different categories of triggers and not just look at individual types of reactions. There may be more than just one trigger type and reaction. It's not all just a reaction of anger based on a trigger of someone being ill-prepared for a meeting. There may be multiple reasons why this client you're working with reacts in the moment. So we want to explore that, just like we do with other habit formation, but it's very important to look for the categories of triggers that might be at play. Then we can look at process options. These are options of what the client would like to do in these moments. What reaction do they think would be more fitting? What would they prefer their behavior to be in response? Proactively, how do they want to respond in a more positive way, perhaps? And coming up with a few of these things, then we can begin experimenting with these possibilities in the moment, throughout the week, and maybe even in lighter conversations. In some of my coaching, some of my clients have found it very useful to try their chosen reaction in instances in and out of work where the trigger is just slightly there or something somewhat similar to the triggers there, so they can get that extra practice in and celebrate success in those ways. So designing the experimentation around reacting in the moment in a corporate setting, you got to be a bit creative there in working with the client to find ways to practice new behaviors. Finally, one of the biggest challenges of coaching around reacting in the moment is that it's challenging to remember what to do when you are having this conversation in the hallway and it was an unexpected event. So remembering what the chosen reaction is, that can often be the focus of the coaching as well. So we could look at what habits might lead to remembering in the moment, or we could look at simple things like making sure there's a sticky note on the computer for a reminder, or wearing a certain piece of apparel that they might wear when they go to that board meeting or leadership meeting where the trigger often will be present. Or maybe there'll be a hand gesture. So anytime they're talking with this individual, they have a hand gesture that they use, and the using of that hand gesture is their habit that they put into place. And then around that, kind of a light keystone habit of the hand gesture, whatever it is, then they can use that as kind of an anchor point or a reminder to help them remember how they want to react in that kind of setting. And then there are process, project, preparation, time management habits These are the brunt of all of the habit conversations that I've had over the years. They kind of fill in this lump of coaching agendas for me because they all have a similar feel and cadence. We use the same types of frameworks that we found in all the materials we've seen so far on habit formation. But the key is to break down the specific behaviors underneath the surface. So again, BJ Fogg's idea of the swarm of behaviors is, I think, very helpful here, because a person can have a hard time preparing for presentations in front of their executives, but it's not about preparing for the presentation. It's about all those little behaviors that build that overall habit that they would like to adjust. So make sure around time management conversations, process and project management improvements to whatever process they have in play, or preparation enhancements where they want to get better at preparing for something that they need to be doing, performance reviews or presentations before a leadership meeting or executives. And all of these things help them consider the smaller scale, the little pieces. They may not even consider habits as part of the conversation. Time management, usually they do, but the others, they might not have habit formation on their radar. It's a good opportunity to introduce habit frameworks and the potential to work on something tiny that will help them better prepare to do presentations for the executive team, or to be more effective at managing expectations and communicating those expectations to various stakeholders around a project. What are the habits at play that we can work on and create tiny adjustments around in order for this individual to grow with those parts of their lives? I think one of the biggest takeaways from looking at common corporate habits is that many people don't have habit redesign on their radar when they go to their coach. They may come to the coach just expecting the coach to have some advice, some tips, some tools, when oftentimes, almost always, the answer is within them, not in any overly esoteric way, but the answer is in them that they have the ability to design a new process and a new system through their habits. Those habits are the behaviors that build towards their success. And as they make those adjustments, not relying on a tool or framework, but as they create their own habits, they will see more success in a lot of different aspects of their working life and even outside of work. It's great to have you guys here as coaches to support people in all walks of life. Thank you for coaching. Thank you for tuning in and continuing to learn with me.